Class, my name is Francisco Corona, and thank you for the opportunity for my team, Group 5, to present our Capstone project to you. I wanted to quickly introduce my teammates in order of presenters. Hello from me again, Moses De Leon, Eric Sanchez, Donald Stewart, and Jacob Wood. We hope that you enjoy our presentation. Stanley Kubrick's Path of Glory hinges on control on characters vying for control over others, themselves, and their environment. It's a constant quest for perfection and dominance, the manifestation of which ranges from the regimented routines of a prizefighter to the psychological supremacy of a marriage torn asunder. Above anything else, authority in wartime is the prevailing thematic obsession among the director's 13-feature filmography. Path of Glory is a stirring tale of forlorn foxholes and callous bureaucracies, of blind ambitions and hapless destinies. Adapted from Humphrey Cobb's novel of the same name, this World War I account concerns a group of French soldiers tried for cowardice after retreating or simply remaining stationary during fierce enemy fire. As you can see from the agenda slide, I'll be presenting our synopsis of Path of Glory. Moses De Leon will present the shadows found in Colonel Dax and Corporal Philippe Paris. Eric Sanchez is presenting the elements of character for Colonel Dax and Colonel Paris. Donald Stewart is assessing the ethical climate for the regimental and sector headquarters. And last but not least, Jacob Wood will provide his final thoughts and conclusion of our presentation. Setting the stage. Throughout the film, Kubrick compares or contrasts in different scenes the excess and inhumanity of the commanding officers with the deprivation and underlying humanity of the soldiers. Because there is no way to directly go between the officers and soldiers, Kubrick made the character of Colonel Dax important in the film as a way to connect the two sides of the issue. Throughout the film, he moves between the two groups to bring light to the different criteria by which the viewer is to judge the commanders and the soldiers. Because of his function, Colonel Dax is never really allowed to join either of the two sides, and at the end of the film, he is left disconnected. In my opinion, Kubrick has made it clear through camera and plotline whose side we should be on and whose side Colonel Dax is on. Kubrick's critique aims towards the ignorant, inhumane system and ruthless logic of military law as defined through the power-mongering among aristocrats and inequality of the social ladder. I wanted to briefly introduce our group's assigned characters for assessment, Colonel Dax and Corporal Philippe Paris. Colonel Dax was a lawyer in peacetime who has taken an officer's role in the First World War. But Colonel Dax is no detached warmonger. We see that in the film he is down in the trenches with his men, fighting for the glorious country of France. He later becomes disillusioned, especially when he faces dishonest and cowardly generals who cannot seem to understand the horrors of war. He has an upstanding, tough, and intelligent personality. Colonel Dax has the mind of a lawyer and the heart of a soldier, but that does not mean that he's willing to fight any fool's war. Dax is not susceptible to the nationalistic passion that grips his commanding officers. Corporal Philippe Paris is one of the three ordered by Colonel Dax to go on a reconnaissance patrol into the darkness of no man's land before the assault. He was accompanied by the cowardly Lieutenant Roget and Private Lejeune. During the mission, Corporal Paris finds Lejeune's ripped open body after Lieutenant Roget thoughtlessly hurled the hand grenade that killed him. He displayed a humble, credible, and approachable personality. Corporal Paris is a well-trained soldier, loyal to his comrades and superiors. He is not afraid to openly identify unethical situations and has the courage to correct a situation. When conversing with another soldier while cleaning his weapon the day before the attack, he was asked, "Looking over your rifle, I see." Corporal Paris responded, "Well, that's the way. It's a soldier's best friend. You be good to it and it will always be good to you." That mindset is what a well-trained soldier is taught as soon as he or she enters the Army. Now that you have an understanding of Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, Paths of Glory, and an introduction of key characters, please allow my teammates to continue our assessment, starting with Moses De Leon presenting the specific shadows present in Colonel Dax and Corporal Paris.
Hello class, my name is Moses De Leon and I will be discussing the shadows present in both Corporal Paris and Colonel Dax. Before I do, I would like to give a brief overview of the leader's shadows. So what are shadows? Shadows are the bad or toxic side of ethical leadership. On top of their rigorous tasks and responsibilities, leaders are faced with ethical burdens. How leaders choose to handle these burdens determines if they are good, light, or bad, shadows. As Johnson states in our text, shadows are cast when leaders abuse power, fail to assume responsibilities, hoard privileges, mismanage information, act inconsistently, and/or misplace or betray loyalties. There are two shadows Corporal Paris exhibits in Paths of Glory. As we see Corporal Paris' first appearance with Private Lejeune, he states that he holds no respect for Lieutenant Roger, his commanding officer. Corporal Paris claims the lieutenant dislikes him because he holds no respect for him. He dislikes the lieutenant's heavy drinking while on duty and cowardly behavior. However, in his interactions with Colonel Dax, another superior officer, Corporal Paris is more open and candid with his experiences. Colonel Dax is more focused, relatable, and exhibits courageous behavior. This shadow of inconsistency shows Corporal Paris to hold more respect for admirable and ethical officers. Another shadow Corporal Paris casts is a shadow of mismanaged information. When Lieutenant Roger's wildly thrown grenade kills Private Lejeune, Corporal Paris acknowledges it and confronts him. However, he submits to Lieutenant Roger's supremacism and intimidation. It is not until Lieutenant Roger chooses Corporal Paris as a scapegoat does he disclose it to Colonel Dax, but then it is too late to acknowledge. There are three shadows Colonel Dax exhibits in Paths of Glory. The first shadow is the shadow of power, specifically soft power. Colonel Dax advocates to represent the three scapegoats at the court-martial hearing as he is a prestigious criminal lawyer who wants to give his men the best chance of salvation. He holds legitimate power with his colonel ranking and referent power with his admirable leadership. We see the three scapegoats confide in him and respect his leadership. Colonel Dax passionately exclaims they will take the anthill so that he can be with his men. The next shadow is the shadow of misplaced and broken loyalties. When General Moreau initially requests Colonel Dax to take the anthill, he says no, he is not a yes man. Colonel Dax understands his men are outnumbered, unsupported, and unhealthy. Only until he is threatened to be relieved of his duty does he agree to the mission. Colonel Dax also discloses to General Broussard that General Moreau ordered his own artillery to fire on his own men at the anthill. When General Broussard offers him General Moreau's job, he again breaks his loyalty and declines the promotion. Colonel Dax is in disbelief of this unethical behavior and feels completely disconnected from his superior officers. The last shadow is the shadow of mismanaged information. Colonel Dax carries out the mission knowing he will lose more than half of his men in the process and that there is no support on the way. In the trenches, he pushes his men forward to give it another try, only to fall back to avoid an undeniable massacre. Next, we will hear from Eric Sanchez about the elements of character.
Hi, my name is Eric Sanchez, and today we'll be talking about the elements of a character as it pertains to Colonel Dax and Corporal Paris. Before we get started, just wanted to share with you guys the 9 essential elements of a character, which would include courage and grit, temperance and wisdom, justice and optimism, integrity and humility, as well as compassion, which would include things like kindness, generosity, and love. Let's take a closer look how these elements are portrayed in Colonel Dax and Corporal Paris. Hi. As we learned earlier in our elements of character, we're going to take a closer look here specifically at Colonel Dax. In the film's Path of Glory, we meet the character Colonel Dax, played none other than by Kirk Douglas. In the film, Colonel Dax is the commanding officer for French soldiers who oppose an attack that would be to the suicide of many fellow soldiers. Dax, played by Douglas, will use his background as an attorney to defend the impending court-martial when they are charged for stopping the mission. As we learned in Elements of Character, we've seen here Colonel Dax display acts of courage as well as acts of compassion. Standing tall and a very noble in his day-to-day life as an attorney, he was a very interesting man. It was during the start of the World War where he took on the persona of Colonel Dax. In the film, Dax oversees leading the attack on Ant Hill. Colonel Dax's character was that of a nobleman who was often found in the trenches working with his men with a common mission in mind. The theme of Colonel Dax is carried out throughout who at one point finds himself having to step and defend his men when internal battles come to surface. Colonel Dax is a good man, and his character is one of honor, as Colonel Dax is highly intelligent and rugged with a high ethical standard. Of course, Colonel Dax is ethical as an attorney, and he has always taken the high road. As a soldier, he is able to take all his personal complexities and fight to the great fight for him and his men. Hi! As we move on and explore elements of character, we're going to take a look at someone else within the film Paths of Glory, and that's Corporal Philippe Paris. Now, Corporal Philippe Paris is played none other than by Ralph Meeker. Now, in the film, Corporal Philippe Paris is one of the men who is selected ultimately to be punished for the failure of a mission within his team. He is primarily selected for one reason, and that's really because he was a witness and had knowledge of what his lieutenant did wrong, his superior, during a drunken stupor, which took the lives of others. Now, when you look at his character, he displays a good amount of courage, as well as compassion for those that did lose their lives. During the film, you'll notice how Philippe Paris questions Lieutenant Rogert about the attack after he finds the dead soldier. And during the conversation, of course, Rogert denies wrongdoing, which Rogert threatens Paris that no one would believe him if he challenged his superior and told his story. Rogert then offers to generate false reports, cover up the incident, and makes the offer to Corporal Philippe Paris that it would stop them from being involved in any wrongdoing relating to the attacks. Now, when we think of the elements of character, we know that Paris had the courage to point out to his superior what went wrong during the mission, who it affected, and confronted his superior. And Paris was compassionate when it came to others, and it's important for him to ensure that their story is told and that he finds justice for those soldiers who lost their lives. Next up, we're going to be hearing from our teammate, Donald Stewart, who is going to briefly assess the ethical change climate as it existed in and around the headquarters and sector headquarters during the period covered in the film.
Good evening, class. My name is Donald Stewart, and I will continue this presentation. I will now discuss the ethical climate at the Regimental Sector Headquarters in regards to Colonel Dax and Corporal Philippe Harris. I will only touch on about 3 points from a healthy ethical climate that we discussed in Chapter 10. My choices are trust, justice, and integrity. Now, looking at first what an ethical climate is, it is part of the organization's culture. So you have to have a positive culture. We can see that clearly in the movie at the very beginning, in the first scene between the two general officers, that the climate seemed very positive and ethically sound at the very beginning. However, after a few minutes into the film, you can see where it derailed. But as far as with Colonel Dax, when it comes to trust that his men had of him, he had positive expectations of his men that they would follow his orders, and vice versa. The men had trust in him that he would lead them and take care of their every need. Corporal Phillips was an honest man, and he did his job very well, and he contributed to the ethical climate of the organization from the role that he filled. When it came to justice, the book says that the workplace takes 3 forms: distributive, procedural, and interactual. Moral leaders treat people with dignity and respect. Can't really say that the organization treated men with dignity and respect, as we already know from the movie when it went to the court-martial. Originally, the general wanted 30 men. 10 men per company. However, that was later disrupted by the other general, and he said no, and they settled on 3 random men. Colonel Dax distributed justice by defending his men in a short court-martial. Short flash to bang, coming deciding that morning at approximately 9, 10 o'clock, and then court-martial convened at 1500. That left him a few hours to set up a hasty defense. Corporal Phillips displayed integrity during that trial, that court-martial, and everything said fast. So
Here's my 2 cents. I will be followed by Jacob Wood with the conclusion of this presentation.
Hello, class. My name is Jacob Wood. I will be giving the final thoughts and conclusion for the presentation. Paths of Glory is an anti-war film that examines the injustice within the French army rather than with the conflict between the French and the Germans. Group 5 explored the shadows and elements of character of Colonel Dax and Corporal Paris, along with the ethical climate of the regimental and sector headquarters. Stanley Kubrick has made a movie that truly shows the physical and mental brutality of war.